Can the continent trust Trump to do a deal in 90 days? First, some African nations were facing the highest U.S. tariffs, only to see them slashed to 10% overnight. Despite the dithering, we want to ask what Trump's tariffs might mean for African exporters and American consumers who buy their products. Tariffs are simply a tax on exports. So what's at stake and who's being threatened? Let's take a look at selected countries on the continent and what they export to the U.S. Back in March, Trump mocked Lesotho as a, quote, nation nobody had heard of. Then he slapped a 50% tariff on products like blue jeans produced in the tiny nation, one of the highest in the world. That would mean an instant price rise for its key export to the U.S. Trump's tariffs may yet leave a bitter taste for connoisseurs of vanilla ice cream. He's threatened tariffs of 47% on Madagascar's exports, like the vanilla worth $143 million it sold to the U.S. in 2023. And fancy chocolate sauce on your ice? Prices could be going up on chocolate if he goes ahead. Trump's threat was a 21% tax on imports from Ivory Coast, which are mainly cocoa, the key ingredient in the dessert. Any imposition of Trump's tariffs after the 90 days would be a severe blow for the continent's economic heavy hitters like South Africa. The proposed 31% levy on U.S. exports would mean the fruit business there taking a bruising. Take Citrusdal, named after the oranges sold to U.S. consumers when they're out of season there. Exporters in the small town are worried about Trump's squeeze. We have this report from Western Cape, where DW correspondent Dianne Hawker has been talking to growers bracing for a sour season.
Citrusdal, a small Western Cape town that gets its name from its most famous export. The oranges, satsumas and mandarins planted on these hills and valleys are destined for the United States. But farmers here, like Gerrit van der Merwe, are now facing uncertain times thanks to Donald Trump. The U.S. administration announced a 31% tariff on South African goods. The tariffs have been put on hold for 3 months after a violent reaction from the stock markets. But farmers don't know what might come next.
The whole community, the workers, the pickers, it's just a lot of anxiety around. Nobody knows what's going on. They're looking at the leaders of the community to help us solve the problem. But for now, it's uncertainty, and in any uncertain environment, business doesn't thrive.
The Trump administration says it's ready to negotiate with different countries, and Van der Merwe believes South African farmers are in a strong position.
We farm with citrus out of season out of California, so we're not competition. We're only complementary to the Californian side. For the American consumer, we will provide them with cheaper fresh fruit and vegetables on a yearly basis. And then surely that's a net positive for the US consumer.
This packaging plant will kick into high gear in just a few weeks, preparing fruit to be shipped to the US. 7 million cartons of fruit leave the Citrusdal area each year, destined for the U.S. market. It's a $98 million industry which supports thousands of seasonal and permanent workers. And so the Trump tariffs are really a bread and butter issue here, with farmers worried about how they'll keep their businesses alive and workers concerned about how they'll feed their families. The uncertainty created by the Trump administration has left line manager Shamonli Matala worried. In peak season, she oversees 160 workers, many who support large families with their income.
I'm supporting my family of 9 in the house with my money that I made here every month. So yes, it's pretty important to me that we export to the USA. When we pack to the USA, that's where the overtime comes in. And when the overtime comes in, that's where you make more money.
The mayor of the region, which includes Citrusdal, is Dr. Ruben Richards. He's also a farmer and says the South African government should take a non-political approach when negotiating with Trump.
Donald Trump is not a politician. He's a business person. And a business person must engage with another business person to make a deal.
The South African government has said it will support farmers by reaching out to other markets like China, the Middle East and Europe. But farmers here say changing industries is a slow and difficult process. They believe that the priority should be negotiating a deal that will get these boxes to US shores at a price that will keep the workers employed.
Joining us now to make sense of all of this is Hannah Ryder, CEO of Development Reimagined, an independent African-owned and led international development consultancy. Hannah Ryder, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Our pleasure. African countries know there are potentially severe tariffs looming. For some countries, those tariffs will be even more severe than others. But in the meantime, they're all facing blanket tariffs of 10%. What will that 10% tariff mean for Africa? And how might the general uncertainty complicate things?
Well, the vast majority of African countries are not major importers of US products. So they will face some goods that are more expensive, but they themselves, it's more that they will have challenges in terms of exporting to the US. So for, let's say, a fashion designer who goes to exhibit in New York Fashion Week, their costs of the goods that they're selling to the US are going to be much more expensive. And that's going to mean production and jobs could be lost on the continent.
So whether I live in Lagos, Johannesburg, or the western lowlands of Lesotho, how are these current tariffs going to change my life, if at all?
Well, it is right now that it will take some time to feed through. But as I said, it's really about the impact on your exports to the US. For some goods, the US is a significant export market. So if you're working in a mine, or you're working in a fashion design company or another company that relies on the US market, then this is where you're likely to face challenges in terms of keeping your job.
And what about if those more severe tariffs come in 90 days?
It will be even more challenging. And I think countries like Lesotho, South Africa, who are facing the highest tariffs, Madagascar, while, again, the US does not account for a huge amount of their exports, it's still going to matter. And so they will really have to think about how do they diversify and shift who they export to for some of these goods.
I imagine Africa might very well lean into countries like China, already Africa's largest trading partner, but it's facing its own staggering tariffs of 125%. How might that impact African countries?
So certainly African countries and those people who do export will be looking to export to China more and more. And of course, there is a growing consumer market in China. At the same time, with these higher tariffs, that also means that Chinese products are going to get more expensive. So in terms of the shelves that you go to the supermarket go and see different toys or whatever from China, those products are likely to become more expensive overall because the cost of these products is going to increase because of the tariffs.
The Trump administration seems keen to entertain individual deals with countries. Do you see that happening in Africa, or will they offer a unified response?
It's difficult to say right now. African trade ministers, are going to be meeting on the 14th of April to discuss their response. I think certainly they should be aiming for a unified response, but we have seen some countries like Zimbabwe, for example, initially straight away say that they're going to have zero tariffs on US goods coming in order to try to get a better deal from the US. So if that kind of that scenario could continue, there could be other countries, but certainly there's also others on the continent who said we're going to wait and we're going to discuss it together first, like South Africa and Namibia. We're going to discuss it together first and see what we can do. I think it's better to wait.
Even if they discuss this individually or as a unified group, can they at this point even trust what they hear from Washington?
Well, it's a great deal of uncertainty, as you imply. We've seen the policy literally take a U-turn overnight. So they do have to really account for that uncertainty, of course, work with the US. And I think, again, working together to have a unified response will give them more leverage over the US as much as they can have. But at the same time, they do need to really take things like diversifying their markets, looking to the EU, looking to China, the other BRICS countries really seriously, and also, of course, looking internally and trying to find ways that they can find new markets domestically for their products.
Hannah Ryder, thank you so much for your time and particularly your perspective.